Shadow Hack. Chapter 651, The Sudden Appearance of a Shadow. Yuerou wondered what exactly was being tested in the fifth layer. She was completely at a loss regarding this matter. Could it be that she would be eternally trapped in this black space, constantly watching the abyss? The more Yuerou thought about it, the more panicked she became. She promptly sat down, trying to calm her heart down. By then, she had been influenced by the darkness and had even begun to despair. Darkness could easily devour people's willpower, which was the true core behind the mythical realm's existence. While thinking about this, Yuerou tried to calm her heart. She meditated and took a few deep breaths. She didn't believe that she would be unable to overcome her frightened state. No matter what, she had to leave the despair behind. But the effects of calming her heart weren't very good because when she closed her eyes, she seemed to hear words which caused her focus to break. She couldn't even tell whether what she heard was real or an illusion, even if it did lean toward sounding real. Ha 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 Yuerou, you don't need to continue laboring under a delusion. You believe that Yunmu has taken a fancy to you? He was only giving face to Ling Shuang by giving you the position of city lord out of pity. Yuerou, you were formerly the lord of Heavenly Cloud City, but now you work under someone. Do you want to live like that your whole life? Yuerou, he had only let you manage Lucky Wind City for the time being, but you think that you have truly become the city lord. Wait until Yunmu returns, then you will be nothing. Yuerou's forehead was constantly perspiring. She was constantly shaking her head in an attempt to drive out the voices from her head. But they were becoming increasingly sharper, and their words fiercer and fiercer. Yuerou covered her ears, feeling completely crippled inside. Even the energy in her body had gone berserk, injuring her. Pu. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, Yuerou began to gasp for air with large mouthfuls. The mythical realm had swayed her heart, which made it truly terrifying. The darkness could even reach the depths of her heart, thoroughly digging out all the doubts there. Yuerou, if you want to truly become Lucky Wind City's city lord, you have to get rid of Yunmu. Yes. Get rid of him. Then henceforth, Lucky Wind City will be yours. Yuerou, what are you still hesitating for? Don't you see? Yunmu is in front of you, why aren't you hurrying to draw your sword to kill him? Don't tell me you don't want to be Lucky Wind City's city lord? The voices continued to echo in Yuerou's ears, persuading her. But she remained motionless, not allowing herself to be influenced by their extreme suggestions. While the voices continuously echoed in her ears, she noticed that the figure standing in front of her was somewhat familiar. It was Yunmu. He was hugging Ling Shuang. Instead of being cold and detached like always, she was like a dainty and delicate girl nestling against his chest. Yuerou, if you want to take Yunmu from me, you must be dreaming. We only used you, allowing you to manage Lucky Wind City because there was no alternative. You mustn't think that you have truly become the city lord of Lucky Wind City. Yuerou was constantly shaking her head. Moments later, Yunmu looked at her with a slight smile. He waved at her and said, "Come here." Yuerou. I willingly handed over Lucky Wind City to you, but you didn't know about my intentions? Come here. We will manage Lucky Wind City together. Yuerou, do we have to settle this between us? An extremely familiar figure appeared in front of Yunmu. Although that silhouette was very vague, Yuerou found it extremely familiar. She took a deep breath and suddenly opened her eyes fiercely. Apart from darkness, there was only more darkness in her vision. But a silhouette in the distance gave her a huge fright. Who? She shouted out hoarsely. How could seeing a silhouette in the darkness not make Yuerou nervous? She didn't know whether that figure was a friend or a foe. She felt like she was in a dream and somewhat regretted entering the mythical realm. If she couldn't clear the fifth layer, she would be trapped in it for all eternity. No, this was what she had wanted. She collected her courage and rushed after the human silhouette. You don't need to mystify yourself here. I am not afraid of you. Who exactly are you? Show yourself to me. Lin Yuerou kept provoking the figure, wanting to force it to face her. She had a feeling that the person was smiling sinisterly at her. In the darkness, she finally saw a glimmer of brightness. By relying on it, she was finally able to see the true appearance of the human figure. It was Li Yunmu. Lin Yuerou was faintly startled. The fifth layer's guardian was surprisingly Li Yunmu. It wasn't possible. Lin Yuerou felt that she was seeing wrong and even rubbed her eyes. She then looked at the human figure again, but she wasn't mistaken, the person was truly Li Yunmu. Shouldn't he be in the origin world? How could he suddenly appear in the mythical realm? Could it have been arranged by the illusion god? But how would he even know what Li Yunmu looked like to make him appear here? It was impossible. The illusion god definitely didn't possess that sort of strength. She couldn't imagine any way in which he might have turned Li Yunmu into a servant of the mythical realm. This is certainly an imitation. Are you Li Yunmu or not? Lin Yuerou indignantly demanded of the sinisterly smiling Li Yunmu. He smiled slightly and said, Lin Yuerou, long time no see. I have returned. Come, follow me. Li Yunmu waved his hand, which startled Lin Yuerou. Was he Li Yunmu or not? His last gesture made her feel as if he was real. Lin Yuerou closed her eyes, then swiftly opened them again. In that time, Li Yunmu, who had standing before her, had rushed to attack her. His appearance had caused her to lose her vigilance. When the fake Li Yunmu grabbed Lin Yuerou's hand, who knew that a hint of ruthlessness would appear on his face? He was surprisingly ready to kill Lin Yuerou. Ha 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 ha, you, die for me. Suddenly, a hint of cunning appeared in Li Yunmu's eyes, as if his plan had been accomplished successfully. Following this, he transformed into a shadow which slightly resembled Li Yunmu's shadows. Lin Yuerou was startled. The shadow of Li Yunmu suddenly punched her stomach and sent her away. His strength was more formidable than she could have ever imagined. Chapter 652, Shadow Link. Li Yunmu suddenly woke with a start. Just then, he had a strange dream in which he had surprisingly turned into a shadow. Moreover, he had appeared in a dark space together with Lin Yuerou. When he opened his eyes, the first person to appear in his gaze was Brunhilde. She was rested along the ice bed while in deep sleep. Li Yunmu's sudden movement caught her attention. She slowly opened her eyes and said in a pleasantly surprised voice, Li Yunmu, you awake. She didn't call him a mortal, but had directly used his name. It seemed that she had already begun to accept Li Yunmu as her husband. Li Yunmu pushed himself in a sitting position with his beaten body and asked while feeling somewhat restless. Was I asleep for a very long time again? What exactly did I do? Why do I lose consciousness every time? Brunhilde smiled lightly at him. You have already obtained father's approval. Henceforth, you will eternally be a member of Scandinavia. Moreover, father has also decided that when the Heavenly Father abdicates, you will be appointed as the new king of Scandinavia. Li Yunmu's went wide open. I have no idea what happened. At that time, I only felt my brain becoming hot and then I lost consciousness. After that, I had a very long dream. Brunhilde smiled at him again. Our wedding wasn't finished, so father said that it will be held tomorrow once more. This time, I will not let you go. Li Yunmu remained silent for a moment then muttered, I only want to know what exactly I did when I lost consciousness. You've become the hero of Scandinavia. If not for you, we would have went past the brink of destruction. You fended off the heavenly god's council. How could I possibly beat a master god? By relying on the dark state. Li Yunmu raised his eyebrows. Again the dark state? System, was it you again? I only acted for your own good. With your strength, do you think you could be an opponent of those ancient gods? You aren't even a half-step god and you want to beat ancient gods? That's like striking a stone with an egg. The system used the cheat to help you. Li Yunmu rolled his eyes. Then should I thank you now? No need to be polite. In any case, the system has saved your life many times now. But I am very angry with your decision. I hope that you won't let your emotions affect our decisions in the future. Li Yunmu knew that the system felt that way because of him causing changes in its plans. At this time, Li Yunmu suddenly received a series of notifications from the system. They were the rewards he had reaped after defeating ancient gods, and they were extremely generous. Obtain 10,000 experience points for defeating ancient gods. Unlocked new ability. It can be exchanged for 20,000 points. Do you wish to unlock the new ability? Li Yunmu knitted his brows. Defeating so many ancient gods had surprisingly obtained him a lot of experience. The system's level had also jumped from the 9th to the 11th level in one stroke. The Great Devouring Technique which he was supposed to obtain when the system reached the 10th level was also unlocked. After obtaining the Great Devouring Technique, Li Yunmu was startled. Maybe that ability was excessively tyrannical, but when he looked at the other newly unlocked skill, he was stupefied. Name, Shadow Link. Category, Special Skill. Grade, SS. Properties, allows the shadows in any space to be always linked with the host. Attention, you have only defeated so many ancient gods by relying on this old man's cheat, but you think that you have relied on your own strength. Unlocking Great Devouring Technique for you was already more than sufficient, so you should learn to be content. What is this new ability? Don't tell me it is not an offensive ability. In the beginning, Li Yunmu was somewhat interested in this skill, but when he looked at the attention part underneath, he clearly understood that this skill was the system's way of getting back at him. The skill was of little value and was clearly the system mocking him. Although the Great Devouring Technique had been unlocked, he was far from sufficiently proficient in using it to be able to truly devour all living beings. The amount of space elements and experience points required to reach that stage could only be astronomical. Li Yunmu didn't even dare to imagine the amounts. But even if the new ability appeared quite useless, it was provided by the system, so there was certainly a hidden use for it. Li Yunmu carefully pondered over it. The shadow placed at any space couldn't be accomplished presently. But what exactly did the unlimited link mean? Could it mean that the main body and shadows would make synchronized movements? Or perhaps he could use his shadows and the main body to unleash spatial transformation. Speaking of this, it was still quite a useless ability. It couldn't compare to a life-saving skill like his insect step. Useless was useless. Li Yunmu couldn't help but be somewhat depressed. Unfortunately, he had obstructed the system's plan to obtain the secret genetic code. Thus, it had become somewhat angry and was deliberately annoying him. Hello, system, even if I didn't agree to assist you in getting your hands on the secret code from Whale City, you shouldn't be so hard on me. The system's voice was completely calm when it replied to him. You chose to battle with Heavenly God's Council, that's your choice. Although this choice was extremely stupid in my eyes, you youngster could be considered to have profited from the disaster. You have obtained Odin's complete trust and new status. That old man intends to pass the throne to you, which clearly show that your position in his heart has increased greatly. This could be considered as an opportunity for you, an opportunity which would allow you to establish yourself in the origin world. Li Yunmu nodded. Hearing your words, it seems like everything had been settled. But I still don't understand, how exactly did I beat the people of Heavenly God's Council into retreat? I can remember that none of those ancient gods were easy to deal with. The system gave a disdainful look to Li Yunmu. This guy was clearly taking credit for its hard work. But before taking credit for its achievement, the system still had to share its grand feat with Li Yunmu. Actually, I have already obtained the secret code. The system hadn't finished speaking when Li Yunmu received a reminder revealing the position of the secret code. He followed the system's notification and gradually reached the box. He raised his brows and asked, is this the secret code which you have been talking about? Isn't this a safe deposit box? It contains the secret code. If it had been unlocked, the genes contained inside would have spread through the entire origin world, and from then on, gods would have begun to pop out everywhere. The origin world would become a land only for gods and various large-scale conflicts would occur. But the secret code is in your hands now, so you don't need to worry about this situation. Li Yunmu was continuously fiddling with the code when he was ruthlessly berated by the system. Are you an idiot? Don't handle it so casually. What if it opens up, blockhead? Weren't you saying that it is guarded by a secret code? I don't know the code, so how could I open it? Chapter 653, Li Yunmu's Divine Status. Ka-cha. Without the slightest sign, the box with the secret code opened despite Li Yunmu not knowing the way to open it. Li Yunmu was stupefied. This shouldn't be the secret code, right? But then how did it open without him knowing the code? When the system saw the secret code box containing the gene open, its face darkened. You fool! The system couldn't help but curse inwardly. Li Yunmu instantly defended himself. You cannot blame me. I also don't know how it opened. The responsibility definitely isn't mine. However, the gene inside the secret code box began to flow out, transformed into globes of data. Blockhead! Why aren't quickly closing the box? Do you want to court a great disaster? After being reminded by the system, Li Yunmu promptly exerted force to close the box. And turned speechless, for he wasn't able to close it. Once the box was opened, the gene inside it would continue flowing out and wouldn't be stored inside again. The system's heart went cold. Regardless of how much it had planned, it had never thought that the prophesized Great War would surprisingly be unleashed because of an unexpected mistake. I am sorry. I truly didn't know how to open it. Li Yunmu said. The system couldn't think of anything to say. It wasn't afraid of having a powerful enemy, but it was afraid of encountering a host like Li Yunmu. The secret genetic code box which it had obtained so painstakingly had been opened by him, and the genes were released. Once they were absorbed by humans, the success of God creation program was only a matter of time. Li Yunmu couldn't help asking, when did you obtain the secret genetic code box? I clearly saw Odin also participate in the war with Heavenly God's Council. I, your host, hadn't gone to Whale City, so how did you get your hands on the secret genetic code box? You don't need to bother about it. I naturally have my own ways. But now everything was in vain, and the genes will soon spread through the human world. The prophesized war will soon descend upon the origin world. Li Yunmu felt somewhat dejected and blamed himself, but he was helpless. He felt that he had been greatly wronged. He was just casually playing with the code of the secret genetic code box when it unexpectedly opened. The probability of this occurring was astronomically low. Brunhilde had heard the majority of Li Yunmu's discussion with the system, but she couldn't understand the meaning of the system's words. Can we stop this gene from spreading through the mortal world? I can inform my father so we can think of a way to stop it from spreading. If it had been truly that simple, the system wouldn't have been so vexed. The fact was that the spreading of the gene was impossible to stop. Once it entered the mortal world and the ordinary humans absorbed, they would become gods. At that time, the number of gods in the origin world would swiftly skyrocket. That would certainly lead to a war that would endanger the whole world. It was also possible that the power structure of the entire world would change. This was the reason why Zeus had protected the secret genetic code box and wasn't willing to allow others to obtain it. He knew the secret behind it. Not only could the gene create gods, it could also make ancient gods become even more powerful and raise their strength to the next level. Since the dispersed genes would also give him some benefits, Zeus had preserved them. As long as he could break the secret code on the box, he could make his heavenly gods' council become even more powerful. At that time, the entire origin world, let alone Scandinavia, would become his subordinate. The system shook its head and sighed. It's useless. We can only pray that it isn't absorbed by a god who has ulterior motives. Brunhilde suddenly blinked and said, would it be better that I absorb the remaining genes? I want to become more powerful. The system's eyes suddenly shone, and it burst out laughing. Your words are smart. Since these genes have already been released, I should allow you two to settle it. Why am I still blindly holding on to them? Li Yunmu began to absorb the genes and gradually sensed all the meridians in his body transforming. He felt that the bones and flesh in his body seemed to have been opened by the genes spreading through the air. He took a deep breath and began to use the great devouring technique to devour the genes left inside the secret genetic code box. Brunhilde also didn't remain idle. She also began to absorb the genes in the air. She wasn't as fierce as Li Yunmu, who could devour all living things. She only absorbed a part of the genes and felt her strength undergo a qualitative leap. Since she was ingesting the genes, there was a limit on how much her body could accept. But Li Yunmu seemed to have no such restrictions. The great devouring technique is indeed too fierce. I feel the power inside my body becoming even more formidable. Ding! Congratulations host for obtaining boundless divine power by absorbing the gene. Ding! Congratulations, host can already rank among the gods. Your new divine title is Devouring God. Ding! Congratulations host, the world essence has been purified. New ability unlocked. Ding! Congratulations host, Space Element plus 10,000. Ding! Congratulations host, Experience Points plus 10,000. Hearing system's continuous rewards, Li Yunmu was once again dumbfounded. If not for the strength of the genes, he probably wouldn't have obtained the divine power for a long time. His gaze fell upon the few punctuation marks in the system's notifications, then at the new skill he had just obtained. Name, Transformation. Attribute. Grade. Characteristics. Attention 1, this is the first time I have encountered this skill, so even I cannot control it. Perhaps because the amount of genes you absorbed is excessive, your body has already begun to reject them. But possessing transformation, your body can freely switch into any mode. Attention 2, as of now, transformation possesses 4 modes. If host can absorb more genes, there will be more transformation modes. But seeing host's lazy attitude, it can be inferred that he won't be absorbing any more genes. When Li Yunmu looked at the 2 attention points, he disdainfully replied, who knows whether transformation will make me lose consciousness again, allowing you to take over my body. I won't be easily duped this time. You youngster, tell me, do you know what the 4 modes are? The system asked indifferently. Li Yunmu shrugged his shoulders and stated, in any case, I intend to keep this skill in cold storage for now. Who knows what uses does it have? I fear that you will cheat me again. Hearing Li Yunmu's evaluation, the system couldn't help but shake its head and sigh. It seems like the most basic trust has been lost between us. Chapter 654, Lin Yuerou's Breakthrough. The formidable shadow's attack blew Lin Yuerou far back. The dark space was like a cage trapping her inside. No wonder then that illusion god had said that even he wasn't able to clear this layer. It was because this juncture put her face to face with her inner demons. The stronger they were, the easier it was to be corrupted by them in the final layer of the mythical realm. It was most likely that the illusion god had been unable to conquer his inner demons, which meant that he couldn't clear the 5th layer. The task of conquering one's inner demons was truly too difficult. Lin Yuerou felt an unprecedented amount of despair. Outside the 5th layer, the transcending experts were waiting for Lin Yuerou to return safely so they could all leave together. But a long time had already passed, but she still hadn't come out of the 5th layer. Could it truly be as the illusion god said that once she entered, she wouldn't be able to come out? That was impossible. Given their city lord's intelligence, they were certain that she would be able to clear it regardless of how difficult the 5th layer was. But there had been no news until then, and their hearts had become somewhat tensed, if being truthful. Was it possible that Lin Yuerou had lost? Yet if she had failed the fifth layer, the illusion god would have taken the initiative to appear in front of them. However, he was nowhere to be seen, which meant that Lin Yuerou still had a chance. All they could do was wait until she returned. On this trip, they had come to greatly rely on their female city lord. Without her, Lucky Wind City would have probably fallen already. The supreme transcending experts wondered what exactly was it that formed the basis of Lin Yuerou's confidence, which allowed her to preserve until then. While Lin Yuerou was feeling anxious, something major happened, as she had expected. The shadow which had attacked her just then began to continuously split. Moreover, each of the shadows surprisingly had the same appearance as Li Yunmu. What exactly was going on there? Why was it splitting? And why transform into so many versions of the same person? How was she to deal with them? Given her strength, how could she possibly be an opponent to so many split shadows? Her gaze filled with astonishment when she saw the number of shadows continue on increasing. Soon it seemed like she had been entrapped in a circle of black qi. Lin Yuerou began to gasp for breath, finally losing her composure under enormous pressure. She raised her long sword and struck toward the shadows without stopping. Get lost! You are all just imitations, you aren't Li Yunmu, you are all fakes. The shadows began to laugh in a sinister way at her display of emotion. This laughter caused Lin Yuerou to fall even further into despair. These Li Yunmus, could they be her inner demons taken form? If she continued to allow them to spread, she would become a slave of the darkness and would be eternally dominated by the dark space. By relying on her firm determination, Lin Yuerou kept defending the little bit of self-awareness remaining in her mind. She couldn't lose her mind. She would definitely prevail over her inner demons. As long as she could eliminate them, she would be able to leave the mythical realm. At that time, Lin Yuerou finally found the method to clear the mythical realm. I understand. Illusion God, it's your loss in the end. I will soon leave this mythical realm. With her gaze still on the black shadows, she coldly asked, don't you all intend to attack me? Still want to disturb my heart? I will make you disappear for all time. The long sword in her hand slashed towards the countless shadows. The blade ripped through the darkness as if it were illuminated by dawn from another space. This was Lin Yuerou's method to prevail over her inner demons. Only by destroying the countless shadows would she be able to leave the fifth layer of the mythical realm. Outside, the supreme transcending level experts were already waiting impatiently for her return. As the backbone of Lucky Wind City, if she truly didn't come out, the city would have no way to give an explanation to Li Yunmu. The long sword destroyed the shadows, but they quickly congealed again. Moreover, their faces filled with sinister smiles. When she saw that, despair rose once more in Lin Yuerou's heart. No wonder only one person could enter the fifth layer. A demon existed in the depths of everyone's heart. Some people could suppress it, while others didn't care for it, allowing the demon to gradually evolve. The countless split shadows in front of her were perhaps a very good analogy. They were like her inner demons, indestructible, inescapable, eternally concealed in the depths of her heart and suddenly erupting forth at an unknown time. But Lin Yuerou was someone who understood self-control, and she suddenly discovered the mythical realm's weak point. Since the fifth layer was formed on the basis of the shadow in a person's heart, as long as Lin Yuerou thoroughly discarded the shadow in her heart, she could easily clear the layer. Lin Yuerou took a deep breath and sneered at the shadows. You all think that by taking this appearance, you can corrupt me with your darkness? I need to tell you something, dream on. Yes, the shadow in my heart is indeed Li Yunmu. He has shown me kindness and I feel grateful toward him, but he isn't an enemy existing in the depths of my heart, so don't think that digging him from my heart will cause me to be degraded by darkness. You are all mistaken. I like him, and you want to turn the person I like into my heart's shadow? Truly ridiculous. Lin Yuerou's long sword ripped apart the darkness again, and the countless shadows in the dark space were instantly destroyed. They no longer showed any signs of being about to rise up again. Yuerou began to gasp. Saying the things concealed in the depths of her heart had required a lot of courage. The darkness was instantly destroyed, and the shadows faded out of existence. Unexpectedly though, before they were fully gone, their sinister smiles were replaced by genuine ones. It startled Yuerou. This was the real appearance of Yunmu in her heart. Yet it was also good. She could finally confront him honorably. I know that you are only a shadow, but still, I want to tell you something, Yunmu, I will never abandon you. Chapter 655, Conditions for Transformation. The 4 types of transformation modes are divided into diamond claws coming out of both hands, a sharp spike coming out from the back, entire body being covered by a metal shell, and matching your surroundings, in other words camouflage, the system explained to Yunmu. After hearing the explanations of the 4 modes, Yunmu's eyes went wide. Mother of asteriskers, doesn't these 4 states seem somewhat familiar? Wolverine, Dragon Turtle 1? Iron Man? Mantis? Cough, cough, there are indeed suspicions of them being copied, but don't sweat the details. The important thing is that their combat strength is very formidable. After hearing that, Yunmu asked, although I unlocked this ability, what are the conditions for using the transformation modes? Every time transformation is used, the host will be required to give the authority over his body to the system for 1 day. The system calmly answered the question which Yunmu considered to be very important. Beat it. Yunmu knew that the system had some malicious intent when it didn't seem willing to talk about the conditions. Fortunately, he had his suspicions and asked the question in advance instead of being cheated by it again. The authority to possess his body for a day? It was impossible for Yunmu to agree to this condition. What happened if the system used his body to play with fire? Moreover, who knew whether it would exploit his body to do something indescribably to him? boxnovel.com. The system couldn't directly occupy the host's body, which was a limitation placed on it. If it was detected that the system had taken over the host's body without his consent, the system would be stripped from the host's body. However, the system couldn't easily find a perfect carrier like Yunmu. Not only would it take a long time to find another potential partner, but the system would also have to start training them from the beginning. The origin world couldn't wait for such a long time. Yunmu had far surpassed any of the previous hosts, but it had required a lot of time and careful deliberation for the system to choose him back then. However, it was now exploiting its abilities to bait him into its trap. Who knew that he wouldn't fall for it this time? Yet even after being discovered, the system spoke with absolute calmness. That's all right. Since you aren't willing, I won't insist. But you should think carefully about it. If you don't agree with my proposal, then be careful, I will definitely embarrass you during the wedding with Brunhilde tomorrow. Yunmu cursed the despicable system in his heart upon hearing its threat. It actually intended to embarrass him during the wedding, by for example saying some shameful words at an important moment. The fact was that the system was quite skilled in this field. Yunmu couldn't imagine what others' tricks it might have up its sleeve. But if the system truly made him lose face, it would mean that Odin would be losing face too. Yet when had the system cared about people's face? It only wanted to fulfill its craving for amusement. In the end, Yunmu had to lower his head towards the maniac inside him. I just have to accept this skill's conditions. Will that be enough? Yunmu had his own schemes in his heart. After all, he could agree first, and then wait until the wedding ended before reneging on his words. Then, the system wouldn't be able to do anything. But the system clearly understood his little scheme and gave him an even graver punishment. If host eats his words, his junior will shorten to 5 centimeters and will never rise again. The system had surprisingly sworn such a poisonous oath. Yunmu knew about the system's abilities. If he provoked it, it might truly complete its oath. Yunmu thus compromised again. I surrender. You are great, you are tremendous. I can't beat you. You win, just say what you want to do. The next day, Li Yunmu and Brunhilde's wedding happened as it should have. Li Yunmu again faced the people of Scandinavia, but this time, everyone gasped in admiration without exception. After all, barely a few days had passed, but Li Yunmu had already. Although Odin hadn't personally conferred this title, everyone could see that he was a god and not a mortal like before. Devouring God. From now on, you are a member of Scandinavia. Boxnovel.com, Thunder God Odin excitedly stood up and began to toast Li Yunmu. Loki wasn't present at the banquet, since he was probably sent into seclusion to reflect on his misdeeds. I hope thou live together with my daughter until your hairs turn white and you are united eternally. Odin said with profoundness in his tone. Brunhilde looked extremely stunning as a newlywed. Hearing Odin's blessings, she promptly bowed and respectfully said, "Many thanks, father." Li Yunmu raised his cup while standing up from his seat and drained it in one gulp. "Many thanks, king." Odin knitted his brows. The youngster was still calling him king? Brunhilde swiftly said in a soft voice, "Change your words." Li Yunmu slapped his head, recalling that he was no Odin's relative, so he couldn't use the old way to refer to him. Thus, he quickly said, "Many thanks, father." Odin nodded in satisfaction, feeling delighted. Even if the other ancient gods of the origin world were to cause trouble for Scandinavia, Li Yunmu would be his best shield. He was exactly what Odin had been seeking. Not to mention that inside Li Yunmu's body, an even more formidable being resided. Only problem was that at the moment, that being hadn't recovered his original strength. Otherwise, he could have easily destroyed heavens and annihilated the earth. 2 days passed with Heavenly Gods Council searching for the secret code box, but they still couldn't find any trail of it. As the leader of Heavenly Gods Council, Zeus felt extremely ashamed. He had launched a large-scale attack on Scandinavia, but was utterly defeated by a youngster. In the battle between Heavenly Gods Council and Scandinavia, Heavenly Gods Council could be said to have suffered a crushing defeat. Not only did they suffer severe injuries, they had also lost the most important secret genetic code which terrified even Zeus. As long as Li Yunmu was in Scandinavia, their Heavenly Gods Council couldn't contend against it. At such a moment, the loss of the secret genetic code was the greatest one Zeus had suffered in his whole life. Zeus summoned the numerous gods to launch another attack on Scandinavia. This time, the battle will be dangerous, and either the fish will die or the net will split. But we cannot let those people off easily. How are Hades' injuries? Lord Hades has recovered his divine awareness, but his presence is still quite weak. He cannot participate in this conflict, one of the numerous gods reported. There's no need for him to go. Let him recuperate properly. I, his elder brother, will certainly take revenge and clear the grudge for him. Chapter 656, Advancing to the Position of the Illusion God. The fifth layer of the mythical realm was also cleared in the end. At that time, a shocked expression filled the illusion god's eyes. The fifth layer which no one had even reached after him had truly been passed on that day. How is that possible? How could this girl possibly eliminate the demon in her heart? When Yuerou flew back to the fourth layer, the supreme transcending level experts who originally had worried expressions were greatly excited upon seeing her safe return. Very good. City Lord is fine. She cleared the fifth layer so we can leave this place now. City Lord, you are truly ferocious. Just a moment ago the illusion god was saying that no one had ever walked out of the fifth layer, including himself. City Lord is truly too formidable. Yuerou stably landed on the ground and said to the illusion god on the other side of the mythical realm, "Senior, you won't renege on our agreement, right?" The illusion god had been full of confidence until a moment ago, and he was unable to accept such a heavy reality out of nowhere. But after being astonished for a moment, he sighed and shook his head, then he appeared in front of everyone. He wasn't twirling his beard anymore, but knelt on the ground and said to Lin Yuerou while kowtowing, "Illusion God also has Illusion God's regulations. Since you cleared this old man's mythical realm, then in the future, this mythical realm will follow the rules set by you girl, and this old man will also finally have a place to belong." Lin Yuerou couldn't respond for a while. What was the meaning of this? Could it be the reward for clearing the fifth layer? What sort of reward was this? Hadn't they agreed that she would be given a treasure? Seeing Lin Yuerou's indifferent expression, the illusion god lifted his head and asked while blinking up at her, "Madam, do you have any objections regarding this reward?" Lin Yuerou rolled her eyes. She had been played by the old man until the end. Frankly speaking, the illusion god only wanted to find a master for himself. How could it possibly be called a reward then? "Senior, you should stand up. Can we leave this mythical realm now?" The old man waved his large hand, and everyone was instantly returned to the real world. Yet the old man continued to kowtow to Lin Yuerou. "Master, you will be the illusion god in the future. This mythical realm will be under your control, since it has been a regulation passed down in our mythical realm for the past hundreds of thousands of years." A golden seal print suddenly appeared in the old man's hand. It was immediately engraved on Lin Yuerou's forehead where it spelled out illusion. Soon though, the word concealed itself. Lin Yuerou supported the old man up and said, "Senior, you are putting me in a difficult position. How could my skills compare to yours? Your position in this mythical realm has been at the peak from long ago. Today, this youngster was only able to clear the fifth layer because of some luck. Girl, you cannot decline it. This mythical realm's rules cannot be broken. You have formally become the master of this mythical realm. Humph, any illusion experts whose skills are lower than mine must heed your command, or else this old man won't let them off easily." The old man's body gradually disappeared, and Lin Yuerou hastily cried out in alarm, "Senior, where have you gone?" "Senior, don't worry, this old man will be hiding in your body, and I will impart the mythical realm's cultivation methods to you. If you have any problems, contact this old man. Apart from this old man would also like to give you a treasure." Lin Yuerou was slightly startled when she sensed a warm current bursting forth from her dantian. She remembered that when she was at the fourth layer, her strength had reached a breakthrough. With the old man's assistance, she felt power filling her body. Lin Yuerou promptly sat down and began to circulate her energy, otherwise her energy would become unstable and chaotic. The supreme transcending level experts saw sharp changes occurring in Lin Yuerou's body and her ruddy cheeks becoming increasingly more gentle. What left everyone astonished was that Lin Yuerou's skin suddenly became more tender and her face's ruddiness became increasingly clearer. Her body was emitting steam and her beautiful hair became even more gentle and supple. The scars on her body began to quickly regenerate, making her exceptional complexion even more pretty. Lin Yuerou herself was also somewhat astonished upon sensing the changes in her body. She promptly inquired, "Senior, what exactly did you do to me?" "Girl, no need to be panicked. Old man has poured the timeless elixir he had refined over the years into your body. From today onwards, you will remain eternally young and will never age," the old man said with a slight smile. Lin Yuerou was gobsmacked. She had also dreamed of being forever young, but she had never anticipated that it would surprisingly come true. If this information spread outside, who could say how many women would be envious? "Senior, you have shown great kindness towards this junior. Why did you do that?" Lin Yuerou asked in amazement. The old man indifferently. "In the fifth layer, this old man saw your innermost thoughts and saw the man you are attracted to, which even moved this old man. Since you want to catch his heart, this old man wants to give you some help," the old man said indifferently. Upon hearing his words, Lin Yuerou flushed red. So it was because of the fifth layer that the old man decided to give her this sort of treasure. "If I hadn't met a talent in illusions like you, I would have been reluctant to part with this elixir, but when given to you, the elixir became even more valuable. Lin Yuerou promptly expressed her gratitude. Many thanks, senior. All right, girl. This old man would like to rest now. After saying those words, the old man disappeared, and having regained her peak beauty, Lin Yuerou led the supreme transcending level experts back to Lucky Wind City. But they didn't know that at this moment, Lucky Wind City's surroundings had become lively. The people dispatched by Frontline Heaven's Frontline God and Divine Religion's Pope were lying in wait surrounding the city, while those inside were celebrating with alcohol and songs. Their guard relaxed completely. The defenders' actions were tantamount to inviting enemies to attack. Frontline God had expected Lin Yuerou to be inside the mythical realm. While making use of the chance when she was not around, they had to capture Lucky Wind City in one stroke and force Lin Yuerou to drift outside, which was basically equivalent to sending her on a path of doom. Before Li Yunmu left Earth, he had bonded all the powers of Earth in hatred toward him. If Lucky Wind City was captured, Lin Yuerou wouldn't be able to get assistance from anyone and would be hunted by an alliance of her enemies. Not to mention that Frontline God was completely confident in her not being able to return. Chapter 657, Exotic Reward. In the bridal room, the system suddenly began to grin at Li Yunmu. Youngster, if you don't want to, then let me take your place. Get lost. Today is my big day, so why don't you go to sleep? The system laughed at him. I have already promised that girl Brunhilde to inform her about the method to unleash the enormous might of her godly spear. Now is the best opportunity. Hearing the vulgarity of the system's words, Li Yunmu began to despise it. He couldn't understand how a god like Odin could be afraid of acting against a being like the system. If you hadn't promptly acted and obstructed the gene from spreading in the mortal world, the origin world would have already sunk into chaos. So a reward is in order, and tonight, I will give you a different sort of reward. Li Yunmu tilted his head, not quite believing that the system might give him a reward. Just not being swindled by it was already a great fortune for him. If the system truly wanted to give him another skill or ability, he might have to reluctantly accept it. Ding! The system's reward obtained, 10 Great Pen *S supplements and persistence pellets. Are you happy? Are you surprised? These are the treasures I have prepared for you. I guarantee that you can send that woman to the 7th heaven of pleasure. Li Yunmu's complexion darkened. Was the system making fun of him? But after the notification appeared, the items were used straight away. After consuming 3 pills, would the wedding night become a battlefield until dawn? Brunhilde stood nervously at the bedside, feeling somewhat uncomfortable. It was her first wedding, so she had never experienced the matters between men and women. Holding the spear in her hand, she was somewhat at a loss at what to do. That being inside your body told me that tonight we can unleash the formidable might of the spear. How should we do that? You will first taste my spear. Pa, that wasn't me, it was him. Halfway through the joke, a panicked expression appeared on Li Yunmu's face, and he quickly threw the blame on the system. Who knew that the system would speak up at that moment? I am being wrongly accused. I didn't do anything. It was clearly this youngster speaking the truth. Brunhilde glanced at Li Yunmu and suddenly asked, "Where is your long spear? Let me take a look. I will show it to you slowly on the bed. Not only will I show it to you, but I will also give you a blessed life from now on." Pa, what long spear? Are you going to stop disturbing us now? Li Yunmu wanted to cry but had no tears. The system clearly wanted to kill him with embarrassment. Brunhilde raised the corners of her mouth. Li Yunmu, this joke is not the least bit funny. I heard father say that after marriage, 2 people sleep together. Is that it? Li Yunmu was naturally extremely nervous. It was his first marriage, and the woman in front of his eyes was quite formidable, so maybe her appetite would also be quite intense. Who knew if he would be reduced to a skeleton unable to rise from the bed after the other party was done with him. Brunhilde suddenly pushed Li Yunmu onto the ice bed and closed the curtains. She leaned over him and asked, "Is this sleeping?" Li Yunmu was a young and vigorous man, so how could he endure the enticement of a woman? He had also eaten the supplements of the system, so how could the night not become a fierce battle? Sounds of pleasures echoed in the room until late at night. A golden layer of light covered the godly spear lying at the side of the bed, which was affected by the sounds. Its strength increased greatly, which proved the system's words. Brunhilde herself would have never expected that when two people consummate their marriage, the godly spear would show its true strength. Land of Ice could be said to be Scandinavia's main property. All the numerous gods and people of Scandinavia relied upon it for existence. How could Zeus be willing to renounce continued offense towards Scandinavia because of one loss? This time, not only did he invite the three Egyptian gods, he also invited the Empress of Heaven, Hera, to suppress Scandinavia. As for the underworld serpent hidden in the surroundings of Land of Ice, they were lying in ambush nearby. Scandinavia had fallen into crisis and didn't even know it yet. Perhaps Hades being defeated by the mortal was only a coincidence, but defeating the entire heavenly gods' council couldn't be simple luck. It had to be due to a formidable might. Since that was the case, how could it not attract the attention of other powers in the origin world? Every land's ancient gods had been gathered, and their strength could terrify anyone. They had to thoroughly eliminate the mortal from Scandinavia, since it was their only path of survival in the origin world. Otherwise, as time passed and the mortal became stronger, he would definitely come to control the entire origin world. At that time, the ancient gods would fall into a crisis. Is the mortal truly as ferocious as you say? Hera asked indifferently. Zeus nodded at her. We must work together to defeat him. It's the only way for us to have a chance for success. Otherwise, given his terrifying strength, I fear that none of us will be his opponent. Just a mortal and nothing more. Why are you so terrified? Ra, one of the three Egyptian gods, said somewhat proudly. Ra. He isn't an ordinary mortal. He possesses divine power. Moreover, inside his body, the person who originally dominated the origin world is residing. He probably hasn't recovered his original strength, but we definitely cannot underestimate him. Because Hades didn't pay the mortal any mind, he was seriously injured. Don't treat him lightly. Ares, who stood farther away, also agreed. That's right. That mortal's strength is very terrifying. We have to attack now, or I fear that Scandinavia will attack us to protect him. Humph, it doesn't matter. I have already contacted other ancient gods. If heavenly gods council and Scandinavia truly enter a conflict with each other, those people won't watch with folded arms. They will definitely assist us to eradicate an enormous threat like Scandinavia. Zeus, the people of your heavenly gods council were truly ambitious, but ended up destroying their own prestige. We are respected ancient gods, yet you are afraid of a mortal? None of the gods can be considered as incompetent as you, Osiris ridiculed Zeus. You. Apollo couldn't bear it. He was also a sun god like Ra, but his strength was somewhat inferior. But hearing the insults from the three Egyptian gods, he couldn't stand idly and watch. Geb urged them against continuing the argument. We are already near the Land of Ice. Seeing is believing, so let's see that mortal's strength, then we will talk. Chapter 658, Soldiers on the Wall. Lucky Wind City was completely unaware of the imminent crisis. The inside of the city was bustling, and Yuerou, who was supposed to defend the city, was very comfortable since Yuerou had managed the Lucky Wind City extremely well. His carelessness, however, gave an unprecedented opportunity to the flux experts of heavenly divine religion and frontline god. The person launching the attack would be frontline god of frontline heavens himself, and he knew that the city was hollow. Thus, he brought all of his soldiers to attack Lucky Wind City. Despite being immersed in wine and women, Yuerou woke up as soon as the alarm rang out in the city. Originally, Lucky Wind City was well fortified, but under the enemy's efficient offense, all the defenses collapsed easily. The leader of vampires was also stupefied. He had felt that other powers wouldn't possibly dare to attack Lucky Wind City, since how could they be willing to take such a risk? In the end, he was also trapped inside Lucky Wind City. The soldiers of divine religion and frontline heavens were already at the city walls, so it was too late to say anything then. Because of Lida paying insufficient attention to defenses, the majority of the flux experts defending Lucky Wind City died quickly. Caught unprepared in front of the offense, Lida was thoroughly dumbstruck. They had expanded too easily and had never encountered such a predicament, so neither he nor others knew how to fight the enemy in such a situation. Lida became somewhat agitated. If the enemy's attack continued in the same manner, the annihilation of Lucky Wind City would only be a matter of time. While weeping bitter tears, he loudly shouted, I failed to live up to City Lord's expectations." The leader of vampires was very regretful and said to Lida, "Brother, I have let you down. If I hadn't invited you to drink wine, Lucky Wind City would have never faced such a crisis." At that moment, Lida was wishing that he could commit suicide on the spot. If it were not for the supreme transcending level experts obstructing him, his body and head would have probably ended up in different places. Although he was only a shadow left behind by Li Yunmu, he was also a hot-blooded man possessing blood and flesh. He had let down the city lord. With the soldiers already at the city walls, apart from dying to apologize for his offense, there was nothing else to do. Wait for City Lord to return. City Lord will definitely find a way to reverse the situation. The supreme transcending level experts repeatedly urged Lida to reconsider, and he finally withdrew his sword. He felt that his people's words were correct. Dying wouldn't solve anything. He had to act promptly to decrease the losses, so that the situation didn't worsen before the City Lord returned. Kill them all for me. These different powers didn't dare to make any moves when Master was here. Yet now that Master is not in Lucky Wind City, they all became savage attackers. Lida's words raised the morale of the flux experts. After all, facing an enemy on the battlefield had always been their dream. What Lucky Wind City needed was precisely time. They had to kill as many enemies as they could while led by supreme transcending level experts. Previously, Li Yunmu had went on rampage all around the earth while leading those same supreme transcending level experts. They hadn't went to the enemy capital, and so Lida had to fight back. He couldn't allow anyone to take a step into Lucky Wind City even if not a drop of blood remained in the defenders for that. When the leader of vampires saw Lida showing such ferociousness, he also wanted to stand with Lucky Wind City, given his straightforward personality. He drank a bowl of wine with a loud shout and ruthlessly threw it to the ground. "Today vampires will follow our comrades of Lucky Wind City into battle. Kill them all without letting anyone escape," he bellowed furiously. The leader of the vampires immediately left from the rear of the city to return to his people's territory to lead them into the surroundings of Lucky Wind City to kill the soldiers of divine religion and frontline heavens who were lying in wait for ambush. But he had never expected that frontline god and pope would have been prepared for this. Suddenly, from behind the vampires, a small squad of fluxers appeared whose killing spree scared the vampires witless. At that moment, the leader of the vampires was completely stupefied. Where exactly did those people come from? The pope began to laugh heartily and said while looking at the leader of the vampires, "A new power can rise abruptly only through brute force, but because of that you don't possess the least bit of brain. Frontline God planned this to deliberately make you come out of Lucky Wind City so can deal with you once and for all. In any case, you are nothing more than Lucky Wind City's henchman now." The leader of the vampires became somewhat anxious, but nothing could be done. He had come to understand that everything was in complete control of Frontline God. Frontline God's foresight extends far. He stationed our divine religion to wait here to cut off Lucky Wind City's final path of retreat. The leader of the vampires shivered without end. The two factions were excessively terrifying, and there was a large difference between people who used strategies and those like him who only knew how to use brute force. "Soldiers of divine religion, heed my command. Don't let any of these vampires get away, exterminate them completely. Clan extermination. The eyes of the leader of the vampires almost bulged out when he saw his brothers falling down one after another. Yet he could only regret his actions. We vampires won't let you go even if we die. Just as the leader of the vampires said those words, he saw the disciples of divine religion thrusting their blades toward him one after another. Blood spilled out from various parts of his body, and he began to gasp for breath. His eyes turned dark, holding no light. But he swung his blade and killed several disciples in his surroundings. Even if he was covered in blood from head to toe, he still continued to battle. S.H.A.D.O.W had said that they had to battle until their body didn't have even a single drop of blood left, and so he was going to do just that. Yet soon, the leader of the vampires couldn't hold on anymore as the corpses under his feet began to accumulate. Seeing that, the Pope couldn't help but sigh and say, "Kill him for me." One of the disciples stuck the leader of vampires and then chopped off his head. Taking it, they then went to the front line to send a message to everyone in Lucky Wind City. People of the city, hear my words. If you continue to resist, your end will be no different from this leader of vampires. When Frontline God threw the head of the leader of vampires at the gate of the city, S.H.A.D.O.W looked at the person who had been drinking wine with him just a moment ago. He retreated a few steps, simply unable to believe his eyes. This is impossible. How could the leader of the vampires die? Chapter 659, Where did the system go? Scandinavia was completely peaceful at that moment. After the marriage, the newlyweds were being intimate all the time. Whether it was because of the newly found pleasures of being married or Lee Yunmu's personal charm, Brunhilde became completely infatuated with him. When Lee Yunmu remembered the supplements provided by the system, he was still in trepidation from the trauma. Brunhilde was much more formidable compared to his imagination. If she had forced him to go a few more times, he would have collapsed from exhaustion. However, the people in the vicinity of Asgard's Rainbow Bridge were still unaware that the Heavenly Gods' Council was coming. When they arrived, another fierce battle would begin. Before the Heavenly Gods' Council arrived, someone else came to find Lee Yunmu. He was quite baffled by that. He had just become a member of Scandinavia, so how could someone already come to talk to him? Still, Lee Yunmu came out of Asgard. When he neared the Rainbow Bridge, he would be able to make out whether the other person was mortal or god. Lee Yunmu saw that the person before him was clad in a black cape and directed a slight smile at him. Lee Yunmu, you have become a celebrity in the origin world. I heard that you almost flipped over the entire Heavenly Gods Council by yourself. This is why I have come to propose a collaboration with you. Collaboration? You're from Underworld Serpent. Your evil intentions seem to still be alive. I know the resentment and grudges between Scandinavia and Heavenly Gods Council. Our Underworld Serpent has occupied the Whale City for longer than anyone can imagine. If you could effectively restrain the Heavenly Gods Council, I would certainly become the new master of Whale City. The black-cloaked man lifted his masked face up. I will give you some unfortunate news. The battle between Scandinavia and Heavenly Gods Council is about to start again. If you don't warn Odin about it, I fear that those people from Heavenly Gods Council will destroy the Rainbow Bridge. What do you want to collaborate about? Lee Yunmu was skeptical regarding the words of the person from Underworld Serpent. Although he knew that the majority of people from Underworld Serpent weren't good people, he also couldn't go about killing everyone. Since you want to collaborate, you should show me a little bit of sincerity from your side, he said calmly. The masked man smiled at him. Don't tell me that the information I gave you just a moment ago wasn't enough. For the longest time, our Underworld Serpent has been an enemy of Scandinavia. But this time, we intend to stand on your side. Are you trying to scare me? I won't be intimidated by you. Lee Yunmu didn't have any good opinion about the people of Underworld Serpent. But the next instant, a fierce sound echoed from the Rainbow Bridge not far from them. Boom! With it, the entire Rainbow Bridge shuddered. This startled Li Yunmu. What exactly was going on? The Heavenly Gods Council's malicious intentions still hadn't died? Last time, he might have been somewhat lenient, but they were forcing him to injure them severely. While on the other side, the masked man from Underworld Serpent continued to talk to him. Is this enough sincerity from our side? You cannot decline collaborating with Underworld Serpent, can you? Li Yunmu was completely against collaborating with an unstable and mysterious organization like Underworld Serpent. He would rather battle with Heavenly Gods Council again, but he felt somewhat irritated that every time he wanted to reveal his ability, his body seemed to go out of his control. Could it be because of the dark state, which Brunhilde had mentioned to him? But he was still unable to completely control it and needed to slowly fumble with it step by step. At that moment, he could see the situation on the other side of the Rainbow Bridge with his own eyes, so how could he just sit by idly and watch? He was also a member of Scandinavia. But what baffled him slightly was that the system had entered dormancy once more. It was truly wretched. The person from Underworld Serpent noticed that Li Yunmu had taken notice of the Rainbow Bridge's situation and said, "So what do you think? Have you thought it over? Do you want to collaborate with Underworld Serpent? We can assist you in removing it from your body, so in the future, you can be your true self. Not only that, we would help you become an ancient god." Li Yunmu began to laugh. Everything he had was because of the system, and he wasn't a person who forgot favors. "Get lost as far as possible," he said with a sneer. Scandinavians protecting the Rainbow Bridge had been blown extremely far away by the force of impact. Li Yunmu saw the armored guardians at the gate of Asgard even spit a mouthful of blood. Li Yunmu's heart shook, and he immediately rushed toward Asgard's gate. You will certainly regret not collaborating with us." Underground Serpent's person yelled loudly. But Li Yunmu completely ignored him. Those people were up to no good. Who knew what exactly they were scheming? He, Li Yunmu, wouldn't casually agree with Underworld Serpent. In the origin world, dangers lurked everywhere. It wasn't as simple as he had imagined once. He couldn't casually cooperate with anyone. At least, he needed to wait until the system awakened to discuss the proposal with it first. But at the critical juncture, not a trace of the system could be seen. Who knows whether it was still dreaming about Brunhilde from last night? Li Yunmu quickly supported up the guardian god of Rainbow Bridge. His gaze then fell upon the direction of the Rainbow Bridge. Almost all gods of Heavenly Gods Council were present there, and there were also many new faces with them. When Zeus saw Li Yunmu, astonishment appeared on his face. "You all be careful. This is that youngster who defeated our Heavenly Gods Council last time," he said to Hera and the three fantasy gods standing by his side. The three fantasy gods followed Zeus' gaze and looked at Li Yunmu. He looked quite ordinary, but based on the divine energy coming from him, they knew that he wasn't immortal as Zeus had told them. The guy was already a half-god and had been conferred a title by Scandinavia. Scandinavia was thrown into unrest because of the destruction of the Rainbow Bridge. Countless ancient gods rushed out from Asgard, and Odin descended with Thor and Valkyrie Brunhilde. When he saw Zeus once more, Odin was unable to restrain his anger. "Thou still want to set yourself against my Scandinavia, then don't blame me for being impolite." Last time, Odin had lost his divine staff. But when Li Yunmu defeated Zeus, he seized it back. At that moment, he struck the divine staff into the ice with a majestic expression. Chapter 660, Land of Ice freezes over. Odin, today is the day Scandinavia will be destroyed. Even if this half-step guy assists you, your Scandinavia won't escape its fate. This is our Heavenly Gods Council's stage, Zeus sneered. Odin had thought that Zeus had only brought the Heavenly Gods Council, so when he saw the three Egyptian gods, his astonishment rose up a notch. As the king of Scandinavia, he naturally could sense that there were many uninvited guests closing on his land. Those people clearly had an ulterior motive. Odin felt depressed. Scandinavia had encountered an unprecedented crisis. After being poisoned by Zeus, all the other gods had also shown up. Zeus had clearly went through a lot of trouble to eliminate Scandinavia. Get F***ing lost, Li Yunmu loudly told Zeus. His formidable shout intimidated the entire heavenly gods' council. Only Hera and the other 3 Egyptian gods looked at Li Yunmu's bravado with disdain. They felt he was nothing more than a show-off and couldn't understand what exactly Zeus was afraid of. Hera said with a sneer. An ordinary mortal turning into a half-god is truly impressive. But in front of me, you are already dead, Hera said with a sneer. When she finished speaking, countless long black whips condensed behind her. Her power was far more terrifying than Zeus' thunder energy. As Zeus sighed, she was naturally the backbone of Heavenly Gods' Council. When she saw that the majority of the Heavenly Gods' Council had been intimidated by a half-god, she felt great humiliation. Zzz, zzz. The long whips behind her body were covered in a layer of dark energy. The next moment, they suddenly rushed at Li Yunmu. His complexion changed in a split second. He was thrown away more than 10 feet and crashed into Asgard's wall. An enormous dent appeared where he landed. His body fell from the city wall and he coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood. His pale complexion turned sinister, but Heavenly Gods' Council couldn't understand how the person who had completely overpowered them a few days ago be so weak. Could it be that his strength was from his close connection he shared with the being residing in his body? Brunhilde looked at her husband coughing blood after being blown away by Hera's whip. Her expression changed greatly, and she loudly shouted, Li Yunmu. Hera arrogantly shot a glance at Zeus and indifferently said. This is the formidable mortal you were talking about? Humph, he is only so-so. This. Zeus was also quite surprised. Somehow, the person who had defeated them and even used Hades' powers had turned into a useless half-god. The 3 Egyptian gods began to laugh heartily. Zeus, why were you making such a big fuss over this small issue? For a trifling half-god, you surprisingly created such a ruckus. If other god councils heard about it, wouldn't you become the butt of all jokes? Zeus' expression turned slightly red and he inwardly sulked. This is only his outer appearance. You all don't know that there's another personality in his body. The 3 Egyptian gods looked at him with contempt and impatiently said, quickly, deal with this half-god who assisted Scandinavia. Such a trifling half-god isn't worthy of us taking action. Zeus felt quite helpless, but based on the strength shown by Li Yunmu, he indeed couldn't say anything. Li Yunmu was gasping for breath. The damned system had truly entered hibernation, leaving him alone against all the ancient gods. Everything boded ill for him. There was not a single positive thing to be found. When Brunhilde saw Li Yunmu injured, she rushed towards the Heavenly Gods' Council holding the long spear in her hand. My daughter, don't be impulsive. Odin tried to dissuade her. But Brunhilde was impatient to assist her husband, and she lightly waved the long spear in her hand. The people of Heavenly Gods' Council felt a wave of cold air hit their faces, which instantly frightening them. This such formidable strength? Hera's long whip collided with Brunhilde's spear. The long whip was classified as a flexible weapon and had clear superiority over a hard weapon like the spear. Brunhilde was firmly restricted by Hera. She gnashed her teeth and furiously bellowed, You injured my husband, so I will take his revenge today. Talk about it when you possess the strength to back it up. Even if you are Odin's daughter, we won't show leniency towards you. Seeing that the situation was already in Hera's complete control, Odin was unable to remain silent and loudly shouted, Gods of my Scandinavia, the time has come to fight for Asgard. Raise your weapons and kill the enemy. Odin's words raised the morale of the Scandinavian God Council, and they charged like a horse who had thrown off its reins. The gods of Heavenly Gods Council also entered into battle under Zeus' command, which caused the entire battlefield to sink into chaos. Li Yunmu was still calling to the system. Hello. The great battle has already started, so why are you still hibernating? What exactly are you doing? Tell me, how did you defeat these people before? When the system didn't respond even then, Li Yunmu could only take the initiative to attack without having any other choice. He raised the divine Cyan blade and instantly joined the battle using Insect's step. Asgard's numerous gods and heavenly gods' council were in a complete deadlock with each other. In the meantime, Underworld Serpent watched from the surroundings, waiting for a beautiful opportunity. The masked man of the Underworld Serpent turned to the surrounding gods who were lying low with him and said with a slight smile, "Do you see? Asgard's Scandinavian God Council and Heavenly Gods Council are already fighting. Soon both sides will suffer casualties. At that time, Shiva, you will unleash your might and wipe them out in one blow." Even after hearing the masked man's words, the god Shiva remained expressionless. He calmly watched everything happening on the battlefield. The masked man almost couldn't control himself. How could each and every one of them be so arrogant? Could they even properly cooperate with each other? It had to be known that everything was the result of Underworld Serpent's hard work. If it were not for them revealing this matter to Hera, she wouldn't have come with the 3 Egyptian gods as well as the Heavenly Gods Council. With both sides mutually beating each other up, the Indian gods had the chance to act. But Shiva completely ignored the masked man, which enraged him. Whether for good or bad, he was a half-god with quite a high status in Underworld Serpent. Although compared to the ancient gods he was still inferior, it was not to the level where he could be humiliated by the icily arrogant ancient gods.